Welcome to the Student Bible Study, a biblically focused study geared toward younger audiences. Our hope is to inspire this generation to share the good news of Jesus Christ with everyone they encounter.
All right, on a cold getting into winter day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a rookie fullback named Franco Harris is running down the field with about 30-some seconds to go. And Terry Bradshaw is the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in desperation, he launches a throw that ricochets off of they used to be the Oakland, now they're Las Vegas, the Oakland Raiders defender, and lands into the hands of this rookie named Franco Harris. Franco goes on to run another 40 yards into the end zone, capturing the win for the Pittsburgh Steelers to send them to the AFC Championship game, where they would be defeated by the only perfect team in NFL history, the Miami Dolphins, who would go on to beat the Washington Redskins in the Super Bowl. That catch is referred to as the immaculate reception. In fact, some people say it may be the greatest catch of all time. To have 30-some seconds with a championship game on the line in the NFL, and you score a touchdown with just 5 seconds remaining to send the Steelers past the Raiders, it may have been the greatest catch in the history of football. In fact, I've been to Pittsburgh before. I think it was 2008, and they've tore down that stadium. But the catch was so big. In fact, it's rated number one in NFL greatest plays. They have a little plaque and a foot that's imprinted into the concrete that says, "This is where Franco caught this catch," because the Steelers organization was terrible. They couldn't win Super Bowls. They couldn't even hardly make the playoffs. They get into the playoffs, and this happens. Now, they lose to the Miami Dolphins, but from there on out in the 1970s, the Pittsburgh Steelers dominated the NFL. And so in Pittsburgh, this catch is a big deal. It's the immaculate reception, maybe just the greatest catch in the entire world. Or we could think about a guy named Alfred Dean, who in 1959, off the coast of Australia, in fact, the bottom, if you look at Australia, the very bottom coast, this guy named Alfred Dean in 1959 catches the greatest fish ever caught, at least the biggest fish ever caught. It was a great white shark that weighed 2,664 pounds. That's over a ton, okay? You will never catch anything like that again because this man used almost like a dolphin-looking thing. I couldn't remember what it was called. You can't use bait like that anymore, so he used some fancy bait. But he caught this fish and fought with it for 50 minutes. If you've ever been fishing, okay, and I've been fishing a time or two, and you get a little crappie on your line. That's what they're called, crappies. I'm not, being ugly. You get a little crappie or a little brim. You may fight for 30 seconds to a minute, and then you reel them up, and you got a little fish. Or say you get a big old bass, or maybe a catfish, and you're just fighting that guy. You're fighting that guy for 5-10 minutes, and finally you pull him up. It's a big old beautiful catch. This guy fought for almost an hour to catch the biggest fish ever caught, a great white shark that weighed over a ton in 1959. Alfred Dean is the guy's name. That may be the greatest catch of all time. Or I'm reminded about a story of a young man who was engaged, getting ready to get married, and he is leaving his home on his way to work. He gets into a car accident, becomes paralyzed. His fiance's family was not very good people. And they said, just leave the guy. Just forget about it. He's never going to be any good. He's paralyzed from the waist. He can't do anything. Leave him. The woman sticks it out, stays with him, and this couple remains married for 70 years until one of them passes on. And it's the greatest love story, maybe the greatest love story ever. I'm sure maybe some of you can relate to the Notebook or some movies that have great love stories. But you may say this is the greatest catch of all time. This man got the most loyal wife ever. She's dedicated to him, thick or thin. The guy had everything going for him. He gets paralyzed, and his fiancée stays with him. They get married. That could be the greatest catch ever. Maybe it's Franco Harris catching the game-winning pass to send the Steelers to the championship game. Maybe it's Alfred Dean catching the great white shark that weighs over a ton. Maybe it's that relationship, that love story, that man catches that perfect woman. I don't know what you would say the greatest catch is, but what I know is that for us, the greatest catch ever is the catch of Jesus. Now understand this, we're not catching him, he's catching us. And if you allow him, he'll take you in under his wing, he'll train you up, he'll love you, he'll give you all those things we talked about as we lit the Advent candles tonight. He gives you all those things. Jesus is the greatest catch, Okay, you need to understand that. All these catches could be ranked pretty high, right? Big old catch in a football game. Maybe you think about Odell Beckham Jr. going up with one hand catching the football. Or maybe you think about the relationship you're in. Whatever. Great catches. The greatest catch is to catch salvation from the Son, Jesus Christ. That is the greatest catch ever. And so John chapter 21, you could look at this chapter and get many different points and things that stand out. I'm going to pick three. I want to pick three, and I want to discuss those three tonight. Number one is that we see the disciples are fishing in the wrong place. Go back to fishing for a second. John chapter 21, as Hannah was reading tonight, we see that the disciples are out on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus has gone. Jesus has been put on a cross, put in the tomb. He's come back and appeared to his disciples, but he's left again. And as they're fishing, remember Simon Peter, if we remember in John chapter 1 or John chapter 2, can't remember which one it was. Simon Peter is a professional fisherman, okay? He's good at it, okay? This is what he does for a living. He catches fish, sells them, he takes them home. He's good, okay? He can't catch anything. And he's got 6 other guys with us. The book of John chapter 21 tells us 6 other guys. They can't catch a fish. They can't catch anything. They're no good, okay? Can't catch anything. They're fishing in the wrong place, you see. You cannot catch fish if you do not fish in the right place. I'm thinking about when I go fishing, right? We get on the water early morning, the steam's coming off the water, right? Beautiful crickets and birds chirping. Beautiful time, okay? If you go to the wrong place, the wrong part of the lake, and nowadays they have these radars where you can find all the fish. But before, if you go to the wrong place of the lake, you're not going to catch any fish. There's no fish there, okay? If you're fishing in the wrong place, you get nothing. That's what the disciples are doing. They're fishing in the wrong place. Okay? Ask yourself that. Are you fishing in the wrong place? And I'm not talking about fishing, literally fishing. I'm talking about what are you looking for in life? You looking for success? You looking to have a Bugatti? You looking to have a mansion? You looking to have a beautiful wife or handsome husband? I don't know what you're looking for, but you may be looking in the wrong places, okay? By the way, let me say this, young men and young women. I hope you all get married in this room. Some of you God may call you not to get married. I don't know your situation. Statistics show most people in the room are going to get married, okay? Good portion are going to have opportunity to get married. Find somebody. Here's what my wife did before we even met. She wrote a letter to me. Didn't know me. She wrote a letter to me, and she was praying for me. Young ladies, do that for your future husband. Write a letter and pray, and maybe even include some things on there. It's like, I want a man who's devoted to church. Boom. And when you go to date somebody, if he ain't devoted to church, don't get with him, okay? Or maybe you say, I want a buff guy, okay? That may be a little silly, but, you might make a list of 10 things and check off half of them and say, this is a good guy. If he doesn't love God and love you, have no part in him, okay? Get rid of him. Don't even date him. If he does not love you and God more than you, he's not for you. Okay? Buff, tall, dark hair, whatever you want. Cool. Maybe a couple of those we can give on, right? But you have your preferences. That's fine. That's okay. But he better love God and he better love you. I have a daughter who's 10 months old. I hope she gets married one day. I hope she has a very successful husband. He better love God and he better love her. Or we're going to have problems, right? So when you do that, I don't encourage you, go home and write a letter to your future husband. Just pray for him. Pray. He's out there somewhere. He's probably born already. Pray for your future husband. Young men, when you get married to a young woman, love God more than you love her. You don't going to hear that much. Because if you love God more than you love her, you're going to love her as much as you possibly can. Okay? Not always going to be perfect. Not always going to be great. But love God. Take your family to church. It's important. Take your family to church. Go to work. Get up at 6:30. Pack your lunch, okay? Go to work real hard, come home, take care of your family, and go to church. Young men, you need to do it, okay? It's very important. If you want to have a woman who's only devoted to you, who loves you and serves you and respects you, love God. And if you love God, you'll love her. And if you love her, she'll love you. It's just the way it works, okay? Let's get back to it. So they're fishing in the wrong places, okay? You don't want to be fishing in the wrong place. You want to make sure you're in the right part of the pond. Okay, you're looking for the right things. You're searching for the right things in life. They're in the wrong place. And so Jesus comes along, he's on the shore, and he tells them to throw their net on the other side, on the right side of the boat. And they catch a large net of fish. Isn't that amazing when Jesus tells you to do something and you do it? And listen, these guys are professional fishermen. Peter, he does it for a living. And Jesus comes along and says, he's not a fisherman, right? Fisherman of people maybe, but he's not fishing for a living. And he tells them, put the net on the other side. And when they listen to Jesus, guess what they get? Everything they were looking for. The same is true for you. You might be in the right pond. You might be close to the right place, but search for the right reasons and for the right thing, which is the Son, Jesus Christ. That's what's going to bring you all these things that you're looking for. Search for Jesus. Get into the right part of the pond. And so when they're in this boat and they've caught this large amount of fish, Peter takes a plunge. You ever seen these polar plunges, right? I see them on Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, wherever. I don't know where it's at. Nova Scotia, I'm not sure. Canada, I don't know where it's at. These people in sub-zero degree water, they go into a polar plunge. I don't even know what they get for it. I don't know sure if it's for clout or if they get a check. I don't know what they get. But they jump in freezing cold water. It's called polar plunge. You ever done that? You ever done a polar plunge? I've never done it. My brother-in-law sits in ice baths. Good for your health. A little tough for me. I respect him for doing it. A little tough for me. But Peter, and I'm not sure how cold the water is, but you ever been in a pond or a river? It's always cold. It doesn't matter if it's July 4th. The water's a little cold, okay? Peter takes a polar plunge. He sees his Lord, and he jumps. He's not waiting. He's getting in the water. He's going after his Lord. I hope you'll do the same. Even if it's difficult, right? Because sometimes you have to understand, Jesus calls you to do uncomfortable things sometimes. When I was called to preach, I didn't want to do that. I thought, no, that's not for me. I'm a football coach. I'll tell you about how to run a revert. We'll do ISO. I'm not telling you, but God called me to do something uncomfortable. And I had to plunge into the water. And the water was cold. And it wasn't always fun. And some days it's still not always fun. Sometimes God, did you really call the right one? Was I supposed to jump on this? Was I supposed to do this? I don't know what God's called you to do in your life. But jump in the water if He's calling you. Not always comfortable. I hear people say this sometimes. This is good advice. When you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, things will work in your favor. Life is uncomfortable. Listen, I'm an extroverted person, okay? I talk to everybody I see. One of the things my dad taught me, we go in a grocery store, you speak to people. Let them know you know they exist, okay? You speak. My wife's a little different. She's a little more introverted. Nothing wrong with that. We're just different, okay? I'm extrovert. I like to talk. I still have uncomfortable conversations. In fact, I would say 50% of the conversations I have are uncomfortable. They're awkward. I don't have anything in common with this person. I'm kind of wigged out. I'm like, I don't know you. I love to talk. It's still uncomfortable. What is God calling you to do that's uncomfortable? Is it good for you? Is it pleasing for God? If it's pleasing for God, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It will be for your good. So Peter takes the plunge. He jumps into the water when he hears his Lord. When he hears Jesus, nothing else matters. The fish don't matter. The boat doesn't matter. How cold the water is doesn't matter. He jumps in after his Lord. I hope you will do the same. Number 2, Peter and the charcoal fire. If you remember John chapter 18, just a couple weeks ago, we hit on this just briefly. Peter returns to the charcoal fire. You probably, even if you didn't grow up in church, you may have remembered this story, okay? Peter, Jesus is sitting at his last supper, and he tells him, he says, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. John chapter 18, guess what happens? Jesus gets arrested. He's getting ready to get put on a cross. And what do they do? They come to Peter and say, you're one of Jesus' followers. He says, no, not me. He does it a second time. No, not me. Does it a third time. No, not me. Guess where he's at? He's standing by a charcoal fire. This is John chapter 18. You need to understand, Jesus meets you right where you're at, okay? Right where you're at. I heard this said one time. It says, look, if you are in a car, okay, you're in a car and you're going to Charlotte. You're going to drive from Asheboro to Charlotte. In the middle of the way, you get a flat tire. Do you stop and go back to Asheboro to fix the flat tire, or do you fix the flat tire right where it's at? You fix the flat tire right where it's at, and then you keep on going to Charlotte. The same is true for you. Jesus meets you right where you're at. You don't have to go back to day one. You don't have to remember your past. You don't have to bring up all those bad things you've done. Jesus forgives you. Jesus forgets it. You don't have to go back to the beginning. Jesus meets you right where you're at. You need to understand that. Jesus meets Peter at the charcoal fire, the last place he denies his Lord. Jesus meets him again on the banks of the Sea of Galilee beside a charcoal fire. He meets him where he's at. He'll do the same for you. I hope you know that. I hope you understand that. Jesus meets you right where you are. Jesus wants you to join His table, okay? Somebody asked when we came in this morning, tonight, they said, we're going to have food tonight. I said, not tonight, maybe next week. There's something, you know why we do food? Not because I just like to see y'all eat, okay? That's weird. We do it because there's something important about breaking bread. What does that mean? There's something important about eating together, right? You think about your schools. Your closest friends are the ones sitting with you at lunch. In my household, we try to, we're not perfect at this. Sometimes we eat at the couch and watch TV. We try to sit down, we say a little prayer. It's a good way for us to say a prayer. And then we'll eat together. We talk a little bit. There's something important about eating together. It opens you up. It's intimate, okay? It's intimate, okay? You guys in a relationship. You go out to dinner. Where you go? You're going to a date. Where you're going to go? To eat something and then maybe go to the movies or something. You're going to eat together. There's intimacy there in eating together. Why? Don't know. It's just the way God designed us. We open up. We share. There's something important about eating with your close relatives or your close friends. And Jesus wants you at his table. He's not going to exclude you from his table. He wants you there. Jesus wants you at his table. It's important to break bread with others. Invite some of the people at your school to do that. Maybe that's a good thing for you to think about. Some kids who are maybe a little bit weird, a little bit awkward, you don't jive with, you don't mesh with. Invite them to your lunch table, okay? You'll be amazed at how close you guys will grow in a relationship if you're eating. Not always perfect. You may be eating with somebody and get into an argument. I'm not saying it's always perfect. But most of the time when you break bread together, there's something important about it because it's intimate. It involves intimate conversation when you break bread together. It's important. If you'll turn that paper over, we'll hit our last point here, number 3. Staying focused on your end of the pond. Okay, we just talked about this briefly. Peter is interested in John's future. As Hannah was reading, Jesus tells Peter about the type of death he's going to. Could you imagine that if somebody told you how you're going to die? We watched a movie one time. I can't remember what it's called. The whole premise is that the guy he's trying to figure out how he's going to die so that he can prepare for it. Okay, if you knew that, if I knew that, I don't know what I would do. If I knew, July 19th of whatever year I was going to pass away. That would be a lot of anxiety, right? That would be a lot of stress, okay? We don't know that. But Jesus tells Peter, he says, look, he doesn't tell him when, but he says, this is how you're going to die. And it's not really good. When Peter hears this, guess what Peter, he's not even concerned with, he said, what about John? What about my buddy John? What about him? What's going to happen to him? Is it going to be just as bad for him? Is it going to be better? What? He's focused on somebody else. He's not even focused on himself. He's focused in the wrong side of the pond. He's got his mind focused on somebody else, not himself. Peter is interested in John's future. What I'm telling you, what the Bible's telling you under the authority of the Scripture, stay focused on you. Stay focused on you and your relationship with Jesus. It's real easy to see somebody who's dating every other person. We say, they're a you-know-what. You call out their sin, but you have sin in your life. Stop doing that. Stay focused on you. Look, it's okay if you're going to help somebody say, look, I think what you're doing is detrimental to you. I think this is wrong. That's fine, but don't beat on them. Don't talk behind their back. Don't be ugly to them. Stay focused on you. Stay focused on you. Stay focused on your relationship. Peter gets interested in John instead of being interested in himself, and Jesus says, stop that. Stop doing that. And Jesus tells Peter, this is his response to Peter. He says, John's going to live as long as I want him to. Okay? You need to understand this. You're going to live in this life. Now, you're going to get a second life if you're following Jesus. It's going to be a good life. But in this life, you're going to live as long as Jesus wants you here. We see people pass away, and I've experienced this in my life. People pass away. We don't really understand it, right? It's confusing. It hurts. It hits us in the heart. Jesus has us here on a time clock, and you're in a mission field. You have a mission to recruit more people to know Jesus Christ and for you to grow closer to Him along the way. But you're on a time clock, and your time clock is going to come up when Jesus says it's time for it to come up. He's given you the life. He can take it away. He's given you the blessings. He can take it away. John chapter 1 says, we were created because of Jesus, for Jesus. It's all about Him. We say, why are you preaching about Jesus so much? Because it's all about Him. Nothing else matters. Football game, cool. I hope Asheboro beats Southwest in Eastern Randolph. Cool, Don't matter. It don't matter. And I know some of you guys are like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I went to Asheboro, by the way, for you guys who are like, he's picking on my school. I root for all in the county. But I have preferences. You may have preferences. You may get really worked up about something. Remember, at the end of the day, if it's not about you and Jesus, it really does not matter. Let it go. Let it roll off of you. Let it roll off your back. It does not matter. You're on a time clock. You're on a mission field. Make sure you're going to work and you're telling. A lot of people say this too, by the way. They say, hey, I'm going to show people Jesus by the way I act. I don't. If I tell them, that may turn them off. I may just pretend. I may act like a Christian. What? You got to tell them, okay? If I came in here and just stared at you for an hour, what good is that going? I have to tell you, okay? Yes, your actions should show that you're following God, but your lips have to say it too. You got to open your mouth. You got to say it. You're on a mission field. And then the third point here on point 3 is that the fish are only as big as their pond. You know, you guys that have fish at home, I don't know if you have fish at home, little betta fish or whatever. You put those fish in let's think about a 20-gallon tank, okay? 20-gallon tank, just to say that. Put the fish in a 20-gallon tank. They're only going to get as big as that tank, okay? Move those same fish, and there's a whole kind of science to doing that. You guys that have fish know what I'm talking about. You have to get the water right, remove them a certain way. Put them in a 30-gallon tank. Guess what the fish are going to do? They'll grow, as long as their species is capable of, they'll grow to the size of the tank. Like goldfish, right? If you put a goldfish in a 10-gallon tank, he ain't going to get very big. You put him in a big tank, he'll get as big as he possibly can. Sometimes you may have to get out of that pond you're in. Again, it may be uncomfortable. Remember we talked about that just at the beginning? It may be uncomfortable to switch ponds. It may be uncomfortable to leave where you're at. It may be uncomfortable to leave that relationship you're in because you say, I don't know about this. He don't treat me well. She's not good to me. But you say, well, I may not get anybody else. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Sometimes you have to leave the pond. If you're going to grow to your full potential, sometimes you got to get out. And I'm not just talking about just relationships. Maybe it's your friend group. Maybe it's your friend circle. Maybe it's Asheboro. Maybe when you guys grow up and go to college and you say, look, Asheboro is not my pond. God's called me to do something outside of here. I got to get outside of the pond. Might not always be comfortable, but it's what God's called you to do. The fish can only get as big as their tank. The fish can only get as big as their pond. The same is true for you. If you don't get outside that tank, you'll stay right where you're at. Sometimes God's going to call you to do uncomfortable things. Be willing to take the polar plunge and to get into the water. And so to close out, I want to say this. Throw your net on the right side of the boat, okay? What do I mean by that? Jesus is the captain, and we're the fishermen. Follow him. Listen to his voice. You guys that have a hard time reading your Bible, let me give you this last little piece of advice. We'll pray and we'll end, okay? Say you have a hard time reading your Bible, okay? I know it can be tough. Here's what I do, and it may not work for you, but here's what I do. I pray. I say, God, it has to be a long prayer. So what do I pray? This is what you pray. God, will you help me to gain something new today? Will you help me to understand you more today? Will you open up this word to me? Pray, read a chapter, read a verse, read a little bit more than a verse, hopefully. Read a little bit. Listen to it on an audio track and pray again. Watch what God does to you. It's a promise in the Bible. A promise in the Bible. Ask and you will receive. If you ask for Jesus to come into your life, he will come into your life. If you ask for God to open up himself up in the Word, he'll do it. It's a promise of God. Ask and you will receive. This book right here, by the way, if you want to know God, you need to know this book because it's going to tell you about who he is. It's going to tell you about his characteristics. It's going to tell you about you. It's not going to mention you by name, but it's going to tell you about how you were created, why you think the way you do, and why we were even made in the first place, and what's coming after death. This is the book for you. It's a big book. Sometimes it can be challenging. Pray, read, pray. Watch what God does for you. Let us pray.